Welcome to the Explainer. Look, if you've ever preached a sermon or even just sat through one, you absolutely know the struggle. We spend years in seminary learning how to parse Greek verbs and diagram sentences, but when Sunday morning actually arrives, we're left trying to figure out how to translate all that dense, dry grammar into a message that actually transforms lives. Too often, the connection between the syntax and the sermon just gets lost. But what if the grammar itself was the key to unlocking the power of the text? Well, today we're solving that exact problem. We're going to look at how to use Systemic Functional Linguistics, or SFL, along with Constantine Campbell's verbal aspect model to turn your Koine Greek exegesis directly into dynamic, high-impact expository sermons using 1 John 2:15-17 as our test case. All right, let's dive right into this. Here's our syllabus for today. We're going to run through the SFL sermon pipeline, structuring expository outlines, preaching the aspectual peaks, the pastoral application matrix, and wrap it all up with some master homiletic synthesis. Section 1. The SFL sermon pipeline, from empirical syntax to the pulpit. So, how do we actually cross that massive gap between academic text parsing and the boots-on-the-ground reality of pastoral preaching? Well, we use a three-step homiletic machine based on SFL. This repeatable, factory-like pipeline dictates exactly how to outline, summarize, and apply the biblical text every single week. First up, we look at the textual metafunction, which maps out how the author organized their information. This directly formulates your sermon outline and your structural movements. Second, we look at the ideational metafunction and the text's aspectual peaks, basically what is actually happening in the text, which formulates your sermon's big idea. And third, the interpersonal metafunction tells us exactly how the author is interacting with the audience. That shapes the precise tone and pastoral application of your sermon. You don't have to guess. The text gives you the blueprint. Now, before we apply this pipeline to 1 John chapter 2, we need a massive paradigm shift. Pastors, hear me out on this. We have got to throw out the old temporal models of Greek verbs. Seriously, ditch the dot and line diagrams. Reject the whole idea that a perfect tense is just a past action with present results. No way. Instead, we are completely embracing Constantine Campbell's spatial model of verbal aspect. It's a spatial zoom. Campbell shows us that tense forms in Koine Greek encode spatial values, either proximity, bringing an action near to the reader, or remoteness, pushing it far away. Think of it literally like a camera lens. As a preacher, you use this spatial zoom to bring the text directly into the listener's lap, making the application immediate, intimate, and incredibly pressing. Section 2. Structuring expository outlines, text fronting, and the big idea. Okay, to generate our main proposition, we have to find our big idea. And there's actually a very clear formula for this. You take the central participant, add the primary process action, and combine it with the aspectual or theological focal point. It's like a giant puzzle coming together. In 1 John 2:15-17, the ideational metafunction shows us mental processes of affection, loving the world, and material processes of transience, the world passing away. Plug that into the formula, and boom, here is your big idea. Believers must refuse devotion to the world because worldly desires originate apart from the Father and are passing away, while the one doing God's will abides forever. That right there is the absolute anchor of your entire sermon. Now notice the difference here between the default flow and a marked theme. In Koine Greek, an author can literally change the default word order just to grab your attention. It's a huge neon sign. In 1 John 2:16, John completely ditches the standard flow. He forcefully fronts the prepositional phrase, but from the world it is. By fronting from the world, John's textual metafunction is signaling a major structural shift. For us, that grammatical choice directly generates a contrastive preaching subpoint all about origin. So when you actually follow the text's cohesive boundaries and those marked themes we just talked about, it naturally builds your sermon headings for you. Check out this resulting expository outline for 1 John 2. Point 1, the direct command, guard your affections against the world, derived right from the opening imperative in verse 15a. Point 2, the diagnostic reason, worldly love excludes the Father, covering verses 15b through 16. And point 3, the ultimate destiny shift, the transient world versus the eternal believer in verse 17. See? The syntax literally wrote the outline for you. Moving on to section 3, preaching the aspectual peaks, the spatial zoom camera animation. All right, this is where it gets really exciting. This is where we take Campbell's spatial zoom camera and use it as a homiletic magnifying glass. Our first aspectual peak is right there in verse 17, the world is passing away. This is a present tense form, which means we have imperfective aspect combined with spatial proximity.
Pastors, this is exactly where you turn up the homiletic intensity. John is not treating the end of the world as some distant, abstract, remote event. Not at all. He is using that spatial zoom to bring the eschatological decay of the world right into the immediate presence of your congregation. The world is actively unraveling, spoiling, and decaying right in front of them today. You have to preach this as an unfolding, deeply urgent reality. Now, let's see how this builds our second peak, abides forever. Again, a present tense form. It shares that exact same spatial proximity. So in your sermon, what do? You contrast the immediate decay of the world with the continuous, eternal endurance of the obedient believer. You take that beautiful promise of eternal life, pull it out of the distant future, and zoom it directly into the intimate, present reality of the listener's heart. You are literally making eternity feel near.
Section 4. Pastoral Application Matrix, Translating Ancient Interpersonal Stance. One of the absolutely hardest parts of preaching is knowing what tone to take, right? Should you be encouraging, stern? Well, the interpersonal metafunction explicitly maps ancient mood choices to modern application force, meaning we never have to guess. When the text uses imperatives like do not love, your modern application has got to be a direct, decisive call to action. When the text uses indicatives with high modality like it is not, your application shifts. Now you're demanding theological conviction and mental alignment. You are declaring doctrine. And when you run into subjunctives and conditionals like if anyone, your pastoral force becomes diagnostic. You're urging the congregation to deeply self-examine their own hearts and desires. Bottom line, the grammar dictates the pulpit tone.
Finally, Section 5, the Master Homiletic Synthesis, putting the sermon together. This right here is the ultimate cheat sheet. It's where syntax, verbal aspect, and pastoral application all merge perfectly into one unified framework. Just look at how it all connects. For the clause in 215a, the imperative sets our structural role as the main baseline command. That drives our pastoral application to tell the congregation to decisively reject subtle cultural conformity in their daily lives. Then in 216, the lexical cluster unpacks worldly trappings, which leads us to an application helping our people identify visual greed and fleshly cravings in modern media. And finally, the aspectual peaks in 217 act as our homiletic climax. That's where we apply that spatial zoom to reassure believers that obedience yields permanent life. This pipeline ensures that every single drop of your sermon application is completely, 100% tethered to the empirical syntax of the text. Which leaves us with this final thought. We've seen today how the grammar of Koine Greek isn't just dry data. It is literally the lifeblood of the sermon's structure, tone, and proximity. So I'm going to leave you with a bit of a challenge. If your sermon's intensity doesn't match the text's aspectual peaks, are you truly preaching the text? Next time you sit down to prepare, let the syntax build the sermon. Let the aspectual peaks dictate your intensity, and just watch how the living word transforms your congregation. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.